Imagine going into retirement and the last thing on your mind is running out of money. Instead, you're thinking about, all right, who can I leave this money to? How many people can I? What foundations can I contribute to? Where am I going to go? Where am I going to live? Because I have the opportunity to live wherever I want. That is the story of a lot of people. I want to tell y'all a story about this lady. When we first started out in Fed Legacy, the first building that we worked out of was the Department of Veteran Affairs headquarters, 810 Vermont Avenue, downtown DC, right by the White House. It was me by myself and one other guy, and we were there pretty much every day. They allowed us to teach workshops. We taught them, and that's where for the first 2 years, that's the only building that we worked out of, right? And because we were there, so often, we began to know everyone. We began to know a lot of people, right? And a lot of the people that we were engaging with were a lot of the older people getting ready to retire because of the nature of our workshops. And so when you're there, you start to identify different characters. And in that time period, there was a lady. She wouldn't mind me saying her name, Miss Laura. She was the biggest energy in that building, right? While you walked in most time by the security guards, she was there talking shop, holding court, as they like to say. But she was a big deal at the VA, right? But she was almost like the sheriff. And so she would see me and my team, but she was in her late 40s at the time. And when I was like, hey, try to engage with her, just being the new guys in the area, trying to engage with everybody. But she would not give us the time of day. Just not, we were just too young. I was in my late 20s. She just wasn't having it, and this went on for about a year and a half. Then one day, one of her close friends had retired, and she had told her, how good of a job I'd helped her. And so she said, you know what, young man, I'm going to give you a shot. And so I never forget it. It was a Thursday. It was around this time of year. And we met in the cafeteria back in the corner because even though she was a big energy, she was a very private person. So she was like, all right, let's meet in this cut area. And we met. And we made a couple of small tweaks to her retirement plan. But when we did it, she was like, young man, I did not know that you were so knowledgeable about what you're doing. And and she just got very excited. And so every year, she's the type of person, she wanted to meet with us at least twice a year. And so I've met with her at least twice a year since that time period when she was 49 to now that she's retired at 59. How does that relate to you? Is because Miss Laura put in her retirement paperwork the day she turned 57. The day she turned 57, she put in her retirement paperwork. And when she put her retirement paperwork in, the month before that, she sold her house in the DC area, moved down to North Carolina. After that, her sister moved down to North Carolina. Now they had this little compound down in North Carolina, and they're doing a ton of awesome work down there, volunteering, doing amazing stuff. And so how that relates to you is this. Through proper planning, Ms. Laura is able to live the life that she wants to live. On Thanksgiving Day, and the reason why I'm bringing her up, on Thanksgiving morning, she texted me. She called me once, then texted me. And in the text message, like, I got a friend of mine I want you to talk to. And I talked to the friend yesterday. But almost every quarter, I'm getting a referral from Ms. Laura because of the work we did for her. Because now she's able to live her life with intention and the way she wants to. She often says, without sitting down and talking to someone like you, I'm not going to say it's just me, but someone like you, I wouldn't have been able to do this. And so she's just very appreciative. And so as we're getting ready to end this year, you're obviously on this call because you're obviously in a space of wanting to learn more and do more for yourself. And so I commend you for that. But this time of year is the perfect time to reset. If you've been wondering all year, like, I got to start doing my financial planning at some point, now's the perfect time to sit and reset. Me personally, at the end of the year, I always take 2 days. I rent a hotel room. I tell my family, look, I'm going away for 2 days. I rent a hotel room in a random city, and I just do my end of the year planning of it's 2 days. One day is all about, what went well this year, what I could have done better. Then the next day is, what am I going to do next year, right? Those days I don't miss in December. It makes a big difference. And so I just encourage you, as you're, on this call, because today we're going to talk about what's happening next in 2026, is to take some time, reflect on where you are, and start making the changes that will impact the rest of your life. Because there's small changes you can make that will make a huge, huge difference in how you experience retirement, which we like to call your next chapter. So just think about that today as we go through this call. And again, we're here to help with that. So share my screen. And we're going to talk about some of the best strategies that are coming up in 2026, because some things are changing with TSP and tax law that are changing. And I want to make sure that you all, because I look at you all as our team, right? You all are aware of those things. And so that by the time 2026 is around, you're getting a fast start. Some people say, I'll start it in the new year. No, you want to already have started to make those changes. So when the new year starts, you're good January 1. Just like if you go to the gym, New Year resolution, some people are like, I'll wait till January. No, you want to start today so that when January comes, you already have that momentum, right? So let's start talking about financial stuff that you could do to this month that will make a big difference in January as you keep on going. January 1 is the reset. What I mean by that, first point is the TSP numbers reset, right? Now there's an increase in what you could put into the TSP. And so you want to make sure that you will begin to adjust your pay deductions to reflect that, right? We'll go over those in a second, so that when that first pay period hits, boom, you're already contributing at the new maximums, right? So you want to do that. And then the next thing we want to start looking at is what is the income that you want in retirement, right? We want to make sure that we start planning towards that, because that makes a big difference. And looking at it, and so a lot of times when we talk to people, they have an idea of what they want to make in retirement, but they never really look at exactly how they're going to do it, And so one of the questions we ask when we meet with clients is like, what's your ideal income? And a lot of times people just throw out random numbers, which is fine. But what you want to do is look at your number, and then you want to back into it. Like, okay, what is it going to be after taxes? Is that possible? Where is it going to come from? And then once you get it, you want to compare it to your expenses. Because once you compare it to your expenses, then it becomes real. And then you're like, okay, that's a number I can work with. And then we plan how we make it happen, right? And so that's one thing. And a very important thing, because oftentimes what we witness is people will say, I want $10,000 a month, but their bills are $4,000. And so, all right, with 6,500, or you're okay with 7,000, right? And so we want to make sure that when we're making those income plans, we make realistic income plans that make sense, and it can give you the most important thing you can have when you're in your retirement planning phase, which is peace of mind. Peace of mind is a big thing. And oftentimes you get that when you sit down with someone and actually run your numbers. Because I'll say this, like I say all the time, as federal employees, you all have one of the best retirement plans out there. So when you see on the news and you see all this doom and gloom about retirees, they're not talking about federal employees. Outside of this year was all the rifts and all that type of stuff, which was dramatic and fearful. I mean, and there was a lot of fear in that. So I'm not belittling that. I'm just talking about in your natural retirement cycle, and you hear people, complaining about how people are running out of money in retirement. I've been doing this now 17 years. That's not really the story for the vast majority of federal employees, because of a couple of things. You get a pension that gets a cost of living increase on that most years. You have your Social Security. You also have your TSP. Most people are living off of just Social Security and their 401k, which oftentimes isn't that much because they're always borrowing from it. And then that 401k has so many jobs, whereas federal employees, you have the ability to really grow your wealth when it comes to your TSP, and then live off of your pension and your Social Security when you do proper income planning. So that's another piece on the income. And then the last piece is the January 28th feature launch, which is the TSP Roth conversion that will be available starting January 2028. And so let's first talk about the new limits. If you're under 50, the new limit will be $2,450. If you're in that 50 to 59, it's 32,500. And then if you're 60 to 63, they have that $35,750,000 special. I don't even know. It's just a special increase that they allow now if you're in that gap. And so if you're in that 60 to 63 range and you're still working, if you can do it, contribute up to that $35,000 limit, that's a significant increase that you should take advantage of. Another piece is just making sure you rebalance your TSP properly. And I'll show an example at the end of the slide, but I'll just tell you now. It's like, this year the TSP did start off kind of rough. TSP started off in March and April, when the tariffs were the talk of the town. The C fund and the S fund took quite a dip. But if you just stayed consistent, and I know sometimes that's hard to do when you're close to retirement, and we could talk about different strategies there to balance that out. But if you stay consistent, you will see that the C fund this year ended up returning 17%. The S fund returned, I believe, 11%. And then the I fund came out of nowhere and returned 28%. Right now, will it do it next year? Who knows? And I understand if you're close to retirement, it's hard to take those type of bets. But if you're a little further out, you're 3-4 years away from retirement, remember, just stay consistent in what you're doing and balance yourselves appropriately. And why do I say that? Because as federal employees, you all can tend to be a little bit more aggressive just because you have that pension and you have that Social Security. If you're watching CNBC or you're talking to the financial advisors and they're telling you want to be really conservative and move all your money to these super, super conservative investments, nothing wrong with them. But if they're telling you to move all your money there, you want to kind of push back, because that's advice for the private sector. Because in the private sector, that's where you need to protect your money, because your TSP or your 401k in the private sector is your income, your major income source in retirement. And so, of course, you want to protect that from market loss. But as TSP, as federal employees, your TSP is not going to be your main income source. Your main income source is going to be your pension and your Social Security. Your TSP is going to supplement that. And so if you structure that properly, you can allow the TSP to be that wealth building tool. So when it comes to rebalancing your TSP, think more as a federal employee, not so much as a private sector individual, which can be very different, right? The next thing that I want to talk about is 2028. They said 2028, but it could be hit or miss, because how government has IT issues and things like that from time to time. And so they say 2028, the Roth conversion feature will roll out within TSP. Now, according to the bulletin that rolled out, that you can begin to do the Roth conversions inside of your TSP starting January 2028. If you're working, though, you have to be very careful, because if you're working and you do the Roth conversions, what you can do if you don't do it correctly, you could end up pushing yourself into higher tax brackets, which make it not worth it, right? So what you want to do is you want to make sure you sit down with your tax advisor and make sure you go through it and make sure that it's the right move for you to do. And if your tax person is just like somebody that just does your TurboTax or H&R Block tax, but they don't specialize in investments, you probably want to seek a second opinion, just because they just might not be aware of like the pros and cons to that. And so while you're working is oftentimes not the best time to do Roth conversions. Roth conversions are meant to be done when you're retired. And the reason why that is because when you retire, your tax bracket drops, right? Like when you're working, you're in your highest earning years. When you retire, now you're living off of a pension, which is much lower than what your salary is. And then your Social Security, which you're also getting, isn't taxed fully. Just a percentage of your Social Security is taxed. So you want to make sure that when you're doing these Roth conversions, you do it strategically. And it's really meant for those that are retired if you really want to get the best bang for your buck. Another thing to think about with this TSP Roth conversion is, let's say you transfer, $50,000 over from your Roth account to your traditional account. When you do that, you're going to get hit with taxes. The limitation on the TSP program, or feature, I should say, is they're requiring you to come out of pocket with cash to pay the taxes. So you must have the cash sitting aside in a separate account and pay the taxes that way. And so a lot of people don't have that type of cash, right? And so that is a limitation. And so there are other IRAs and things like that where you can do the withholding, and that makes it a lot easier. And so if you want to talk about those things, we could talk about those things. But when it comes to the TSP, if you're still working, be careful with the Roth conversion, because it is a sexy feature, right? But you can run yourself into some tax issues if you're transferring too much money and put yourself in a higher tax bracket just because you think you're doing the right thing, right? And so just be leery of that. Most cases, the best time to do the Roth conversions and the perfect time is when you first retire, right in that, right when you first retire, because at that point, your taxable income is going to be at the lowest bracket that it can be. And then you do the raw conversions up to the next bracket. And that way you do it in a systematic way. And you end up saving yourself a lot more money in taxes. And this is a big deal when it comes to wealth planning, because you can save yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars in yourself and your kids, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases millions, depending on how big your TSP balance is when you do the proper tax planning. So, and we talked about that a lot. So, and then the last piece is just making sure you have your proper income met, right? You want to make sure your pension income is like your foundation. You're getting that no matter what, right? And then you get you're going to get the cost of living increases with that. That's your foundation. Social Security is there too to help you protect against inflation. Those two together give you a nice buffer when it comes to inflation on the income side. And then your TSP, you can grow that. And that also gives you another buffer towards inflation, also long-term care, also wealth, also taxes later on in life, right? And so when you have all those things laid out, as we talk about in our financial house all the time, you end up having that retirement where you're not looking back to work. And that's the thing that, Ms. Laura, I mean, like I said, she's living her life in North Carolina, just turned 59, young, energy, living her best life, because we made sure over that time period we helped her plan for this time. And now she's not thinking about coming back to work. Her and her husband travel. I mean, they're going they're living a good life because they plan properly, right? And so you want to make sure that you plan properly, and it doesn't take much work. You just need to plan properly, and that way you can retire well. Because as a federal employee, like I said, you have one of the best benefit packages out there. And so all the doom and gloom you hear on the news, it really doesn't apply to you, because you have that pension plus that Social Security, which is huge. Most people don't have, majority of Americans don't have that. And so because you have that, it gives you a head start and allows you to do other things, think bigger, who you want to leave money to. We always talk about the legacy story. How do you want to help your family? One of the things I'm personally very, very passionate about is hearing people say, all right, well, I want to make this impact on my family. One of the things I help do was start the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce, because I'm a big believer in entrepreneurs help solve the community problems. I started Fed Legacy because my parents was not educated on finances. And because they weren't educated on finances, I was at the University of Maryland, and I was looking at all my counterparts, and a lot of their families that set them up for wealth. And I was looking at me and my other people that looked like me, my friends, and we were burdened with student loan debt, no clue what we were going to do. We took, one time it was so bad for us, we signed up for a credit card just to get a Jimmy John sandwich in college, right? All of us, we like, oh, they're giving away free Jimmy John sandwiches. They're like, all right, well, if y'all sign this application for a credit card, we'll give y'all a sandwich. We were like, never mind, we weren't direly poor like that. Like, we were just like homeless or whatever, but we were just really broke college students, and we're just trying to figure stuff out. You know what I'm saying? A free Jimmy John sandwich to us was a really big deal, but we signed up for credit cards, right? Like, that's what type of time we were on. And so we didn't have much, but, I started Fed Legacy because once I got some level of awareness and knowledge and invested in myself in this area, I said, okay, I want to solve this for other folks like my parents, and so that's what birthed Fed Legacy. And so entrepreneurs solve problems. And so if you are the type of person, this is what you want to do for your family, you want to give back to your family, like, I'm all ears, because I love finding ways to create new solutions to the things that are in our community. I talk all the time about the clients I have who dad retired from the Department of Education, mom retired from the State Department, and they now have 4 preschools in the DC area, right? And they're millionaires now at this point. But both parents retired federal employees with a bit of money in their TSP, not invest a little bit into their daughter who had an education degree, but wanted to do bigger than just elementary education. And now they have these STEM preschools all over DC, right? And so love that conversation, want to see more of that. And we have the opportunity to do more of that because we have wealth in our community, right? And so, but now we need to direct that wealth back into our families. And so people always ask me, Ms. Smith, what I do with this money? And I always say, hey, who's the brightest kids in the family, right? Because some people you can't invest in. They just, it's just not them. But all it takes is one, right? And so I always say, like, get intentional about investing with the family, with the younger people in your family, right? Put them through programs, buy them books, go to seminars with them. Just be intentional in your conversations with them, travel with them, expose them to stuff. Like, that's the stuff that works. And so we have those opportunities now. And so, we just got to do it. so the thing we do at TSP at Fed Legacy is we make sure we take you through the finish line processes, which is optimizing your federal benefits. That's the life insurance, making sure you got the proper plans there, making sure you're in the proper FEHB. We can talk through that. Making sure your TSP obviously set up tight, set up well. The next thing is making sure we navigate specific tax strategies. This is an area that we've invested in a lot. We now have an in-house CPA that we work with. We also have wealth managers that are specialized in tax strategies, because we noticed, especially in 2019 when the Secure Act passed, when Trump did his tax cuts, there was a back door in there to siphon the tax revenue back out of the middle class. And they did that through the 10-year rule. And so that became a big thing for us. So we just invested a lot in the tax planning education. And so you want to make sure we navigate tax strategies, because with that 10-year rule, that money was siphoned right back out of your family, back to the IRS, in a very clear way, right? So you want to make sure you have strategies to make a defense against that. And then, just insurance or asset protection, making sure you have the right life insurance, long-term care. But we like to help you prep your TSP to make sure the TSP and your investments can take care of the long-term care, rather you pay for it. But that's just another aspect. And then smart income and medical needs. You just want to make sure all those things are taken care of. And that's what we focus on when it comes to Fed Legacy. And then I think this is the last slide, is just the December reset, right? And what I mean by that is sometimes you just go into your TSP and you just have your TSP invested any old way, right? I can't tell you how many times I meet with people and they're like, how's your TSP invested? They have no clue. And so I just want to give you an example, right? If you would have had your TSP before at the end of the year last year, you had 500,000, just sitting 80% of it in the G fund, and then let's say at the end of the year you had it at 500,000 in the G fund, and you change it over to 50-50 CNS because you're like, you know what? I'm a change woman, I'm a change man, I'm changing what I'm doing. This is my year. I'm doing something different, right? If you would have done that and you had 500,000, your 500,000 now would be 572, right? Based on the CNS fund. But when you look at how they did, if you weight them, that they will return at about 14.4% if you have 50-50. Whereas the G fund and your 80%, there's 20 in the C, right? You would have gained about 4.5%, right? And so that would have been at 508,000 versus 572, just in 1 year in interest, not including all the contributions you would have done. I'm just using straight interest. So look at this reset time where you look at what you have going on and really look at it and balance out your accounts, ask those questions that you need to ask, and so by doing that, it'll make a big difference, right? And so I just want to go over the checklist again. Make sure your TSP elections are set up properly. Don't just go into the new year being passive about it. Look at your income. See, okay, what do I really need in retirement? And the good way to do that is just fill out an expense sheet. Look at your expenses, really look at it, and see how much you're spending per month, right? And then look at your income and see, okay, this is how much I need to make in retirement, and then run your retirement report. Just run that, bro, and see, so you can pull your Social Security. And what you want to do is you want to go to ssa.gov and see exactly what your Social Security will be once you retire. And that'll help you there, and then run your pension calculation. And if you want to know the pension calculation, I could give it to you. Just write this down because I don't have it on the screen. But if you want to calculate your pension manually, all you have to do, if you're under 62, is going to be your high 3 salary estimate. So let's say your high 3 salary estimate is 117. Okay. Then you times that 117,000 times the number of years you work. So let's say you work 30 years. So you do 100 times 1%. If you do that, that is what, and then you're going to get a big number. That's going to be the annual. Then you just divide that number by 12, and that's going to be your pension per month. If you're over 62 and you have over 20 years of service, then what you're going to do is you're going to do that same, it's going to be the same formula. You're just going to change that 1% to 1.1%. So it's going to be 117,000 times 1.1 times the amount of years you work, right? And that becomes, and then divide that number by 12, and then that becomes your monthly pension. You get that number, add it to your Social Security, and that gives you an idea of what your income will be, right? Another thing, make sure your beneficiaries are updated. Can't tell you how many times I talk to people and they're like, oh shoot, I don't have a beneficiary, or my ex-wife is my beneficiary, and so you want to make, well, my parents are beneficiaries, but they passed, 5 years ago, right? So make sure you update your beneficiaries. Make sure, again, everything's allocated, even your stuff outside. Make sure you have a Roth conversion strategy set up if you're retired. And then, just make sure you're selecting the proper health benefits. And one other thing I want to show you all, and I want to ask, we have our retirement readiness checklist, right? So I want to take you all through this. You can answer it in your head, but here's what we're just lazily focusing on these days at Fed Legacy, right? And so, you could just answer this yourself, right? So we have our retirement readiness assessment. And one of the things we ask every client we talk to this, we go through these 5 points. And so we ask, when it comes to the longevity of money, how confident are you? And there's no sevens allowed, right? We do 1 through 10, no sevens allowed, because sevens are fence sitters, and your fence sitter, you really can't, you're like, I'm neither, so we don't play that. So we do 1 through 10. And so 10 being, when it comes to longevity of money, 10, I'm confident my income savings and TSP are built to last for life, right? If you're a 10 there, you put 10, right? 1 is, I'm unsure if I'll outlive my money or if my savings will truly cover my retirement. Now, there's no right or wrong answer. And so you can just see where you are on this scale, right? Or you 1, or you 10, or you 2, and you answer that for yourself. And then the next one we have is security. Security 10, my plan protects my TSP and pension through any market downturn. 1, another 2022 style drop. That's where the TSP dropped 20%. C fund dropped 20%. Another 2022 style drop would seriously hurt my confidence in my savings. Again, that's a big deal if you're in retirement. Rate yourself 1 through 10. If that happens, I'm all right. If it does happen, it will kind of affect me, right? So you rate yourself there. 3, taxes. 10, I have a clear tax efficient plan for my TSP withdrawals and federal benefits. 1, I'm unsure how much and when I'll pay taxes during retirement, right? Just rate yourself where you are on that. There's no judgment. And then 4, medical and health. I'm fully prepared for my APHB, Medicare, and long-term care without draining savings. That means if a medical emergency popped up, 10 is I'm fully confident, I'm straight, nothing that wouldn't derail me in any way. 1, a medical emergency could derail my retirement, right? I might have to force you to empty out your TSP. Something will happen to your spouse. You don't have enough money for the care. That could stress you out. Those type of things, which is a real threat for a lot of people. And it's okay, it just lets us know where we need to do the most work. And then 10 is legacy. My wealth and my survivor benefit will pass smoothly and tax efficiently to my loved ones. 10. And 1, I don't have a plan to protect or pass on what I built, right? And it's fine. You rate yourself. And so we collect those scores. You get a score down here, and it lets us know you're in the starting line, you're gaining momentum, or you're already crossing the finish line. And so we take people through that because we want to make sure when it's all said and done, we want to see where you are when you started talking to us. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure we close those gaps so that your score can go from the teens or low 20s all the way up into the 40s. That's our job, right? And you deserve that for you and your family.